I have to admit, I'm a little verklempt. Right, just seeing you all here and looking around. And for those of you at home, it's nice to have you with us here. Right, some of you in your living rooms, some of you are finishing up eating your dinner. Some of you are perhaps even putting on your pajamas and moisturizing and getting ready for bed. You know, who knows what's going on. I want to apologize, by the way, at home. If you're watching on a 55-inch monitor or bigger, I'm sorry for my head size right now. I've been told it's a little imposing sometimes, depending on what size monitor you're on. Oh, for those of you who are here, how many of you is this your first time back in 3 years? You can imagine, the first time back into the sanctuary in 3 years, right? Wow, a number of you? Wow. Some of you I know have come for other occasions, special moments. We're still trying to get our community back together. What is the theme of this year? By the way, many synagogues have chosen this theme for the year. It's return. That's what it's about. It's about returning. I imagine that you all have different ideas about what returning means. What do you dream of returning to? Large indoor family gatherings, graduations, cruises, large weddings. I always said you'd know when the pandemic is over when you could go to a wedding and dance the hora with people next to you and get all sweaty and not worry about it. That's what we are dealing with is this idea of what does it mean to return. Those of you who are here tonight, those of you who are at home, many of them are planning on being here tomorrow but just stayed home tonight. Perhaps just being at services feels like part of that return, right? About being back together. But many of you have different ideas about what it means to return, don't you? Some will wear masks and some won't. There are others who are not so comfortable with the thought of returning to a service with lots of people, and so they are more comfortable for this year, still staying home. Returning is actually the theme of every High Holy Days. You all know this. Many of you know that one of the most important concepts that we have, one of the most important words that we have during this time of year is Teshuvah. Right? Teshuvah. And we use that, we mean about returning to the right path in regard to our actions and the path that we are on. It's the antidote to losing our way or being on the wrong path. So what can we learn from the Teshuvah of the High Holy Days and returning that we should be doing after 2.5 years of a pandemic? Well, I want to look at another Hebrew word for return. Those of you who know Hebrew will know this. The word lachzor, or choser is a verb. Lachzor means to return. When you return, when you lachzor, right, it means to go back, to do it the same way as you did before. In fact, the word that we have for the repetition of the Amidah, if you've ever recited silently and then repeated aloud, we call that the chazara, the repetition. And we repeat it with the exact same words. Nothing different. That's how many people are approaching return to life in the post-pandemic world. Right? I want to go back to things the way that they were before, exactly as they were. But lachzor is not the focus of the High Holy Days. Right? That idea of returning is not our focus. It is about Teshuvah. And how is that different? Well, Teshuvah is a very different type of return. Another way to translate Teshuvah, other English translations, would be respond, to answer, to reply. Teshuvah means you are responding to something in some way. Right? The return implied by it means that we are doing something different, that we learn from the experience and we choose to go and do it differently the next time. Whether it's responding to something we said or something we did wrong, the return of Teshuvah means we are returning a different person. That's the goal of Teshuvah. Teshuvah is about becoming what we want to be, not what we were. So how do the High Holy Days take us through the process of Teshuvah, of returning to something new? There's a mistaken idea that the trial that we come to begins today, and that somehow we stand before God, and the trial continues through Yom Kippur, when we are finally judged. The image is that we're standing before God on that day and being judged. Many of you, that's how we understand it. But tonight I want to offer a little different understanding of this imagery, and I think the correct one. The second part of the Notana Tokef prayer, I'm going to mention it a couple times tonight. The big prayer that we do tomorrow in Notana Tokef, you know that second part of it, which says who will live and who will die. Right? We say the refrain, Barosh Hashanah yikatevun, uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Many of you know that Hebrew. We've done it so many times. To translate it, on Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on the fast of the Day of Atonement, it is sealed. What is written? What is sealed? So in the Talmud, that great source of tradition we have from the 5th century, 500 about CE, teaches us the following about Rosh Hashanah. Quote, everyone is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and their sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. Judgment is on Rosh Hashanah. It's the sentence which is handed down on Yom Kippur. What does that mean? It's not unlike our legal system, in which a judgment can come by a judge or a verdict by a jury. And then later there is the sentencing. After sometimes a reflection of what are the consequences of that action. They are two different actions. Our judgment is determined on Rosh Hashanah, but our sentence is not determined until Yom Kippur. Today is Judgment Day. Have you come prepared? Have you reflected on your deeds for the past year? Court's in session. How do you plead? As we'll read in that Notana Tokef prayer tomorrow, quote, you open the book of remembrance, and the record speaks for itself. For each of us has signed it with deeds, our deeds. In truth, Judaism sees every day as Judgment Day. The continuation of the section I read from the Talmud goes like this. Rabbi Yossi says a person is judged every day, and not just once a year, meaning that every morning an accounting is made and judgment is passed. Rabbi Natan says a person is judged every hour. So you all know that on Yom Kippur we'll be striking our chests. You know that, right? For the sin which we have sinned before you, and then we go into that long list of transgressions that we might have performed. But did you know that we do this every day in our prayers except for Shabbat and holidays? 3 times a day, traditionally in the Amidah, there's a section that says, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu, machal lanu ki fashanu. Forgive us for we have sinned, pardon us for we have transgressed. And we strike our chest just like we do on Yom Kippur. Every day, just like we do on Yom Kippur. Well, Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. Every day is supposed to be a day of acknowledging our imperfections and working to improve ourselves. We are judged every day by our actions. You all know this. Sometimes at the end of a day, you feel proud of what you did. And other times at the end of the day, you don't feel so proud. Every day, there's judgment. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. So today is the Judgment Day. We're judged for how we've lived this year. Nothing can undo our actions. The process of Teshuvah that takes place from now until Yom Kippur is not about undoing something. Instead, it's about acknowledging and repairing something that we can do to go forward. We throw ourselves on the mercy of the court. Instead of continuing to plead our innocence or declaring that we were insane in the moment, we have to acknowledge the truth of what we've done. We promise not to lachzor to our old ways, but rather to do teshuvah to a new path. But as we all have change, we all know that change does not come easy. That's why we have this imagery, by the way, of God as the judge, as the ultimate judge. Because we can fool our spouses, we can fool our neighbors, and you might even be able to fool a judge in a court of law, but not the ultimate judge. And in essence, we have to be our ultimate judges, to stand before ourselves. We have these Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, these 10 days of repentance, to create a plan for change. This is more than just thinking about how to change, more than just thinking. This is a plan. This is a rehab program. This is a self-intervention about how to change our lives with that sense of immediacy. And it's not about theoretical, specific, self-imposed changes. Will we gossip less about people? Will we do better in our relationships with those around us? Our spouses, parents, children, siblings. Can we all do a little better in those areas? Will we find time for self-care, to take care of ourselves? Will we reach out to those around us in need? Will we be more tolerant of those who don't share our opinions? Will we be generous and share our blessings to make a difference in people's lives and in the world? So many people have become disconnected from synagogue and Jewish life during the last 2.5 years. Will they reconnect? Many people have become comfortable at home. I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow, about being able to engage. Will people reconnect? Will you reconnect? Can you find a stronger relationship to Judaism? We begin those changes now during these days. So what's the sentencing that takes place on Yom Kippur? Some of you have heard me on occasion address the challenging issue behind the Utana Tokef. Right? And I know most of you here, those of you watching, I know that, well, you have your imperfections. Is there anybody here that's worthy of death? Seriously? Don't raise your hands, by the way. And at home, if you're about to stand up, sit back down. Because I can't believe, what could you possibly do, any of you, that's deserving of death? What kind of extreme action? And so what are we doing here? If we're on Yom Kippur in that image of standing before the judge and pleading for our lives, what happens if we take away that image? Well, I believe that it's about writing our own book. It's about our own deeds, and they tell the story. So on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, tonight, tomorrow, and the next day, we greet each other Shana Tova, or L'Shana Tova, some of you will say, right? To have a good year. But immediately following, on Tuesday night, we begin to say Gemar Chatima Tova. May you be sealed, right, for a good year. May you be sealed. May your sentence reflect the changes of the person that you want to be. That's what we wish people during those days. That's what that teshuvah is about. And we encourage one another to be able to want to change. I believe that this is all about the kind of lives we want to live. The real lives that are built on relationships and making a difference. It's about a life of meaning, a life without regrets, a life lived well, so at the end of our days we will say, Zichronam livracha, that our memories are a blessing. Isn't that what we want to say? That our lives were a blessing. So for me, that sentence being handed down on Yom Kippur, it's about the year ahead. Will our actions bring us the kind of year that we want? Will our change enable us to be the kind of people who will fully live life to its fullest, to have a better year? That's what we all want for ourselves, and yet we often don't take the time to engage in that change. We can't control what life gives us, but we can determine how we respond to it. So what are our options for the next year? What are we returning to? I don't know about you, but it seems like a different world, doesn't it? Humanity has experienced heat and storms that are unprecedented in frequency. Do you all agree? Right? The climate is changing. For us in Southern California, we've dealt with droughts before, those of us who are natives here. Remember, 70s, 80s, 90s, just about every decade. Have we ever dealt with anything like this before? Never. Snowpacks, water tables, lakes that are drying up. Dams will not be able to create electricity. And if that doesn't wake us up, I don't know what will. So for us, what is it about? It's about getting drought-tolerant plants, only watering once or twice a week. Those are small things in the scope of life, my friends. What are the big changes that we need to make? We're returning to a world that's far more fractured over the issues of politics and social issues, isn't it? Far more fractured. In a world of isolation, some of you are closer with families and some of you are more estranged. We've lived with such uncertainty the last 2.5 years. Can we learn to accept uncertainty? We don't like to think about it, but in truth, isn't every day uncertain? We wake up in the morning and have no idea what life is going to bring us. One thing we have become good at is being adaptable. Haven't we become adaptable in the last 2.5 years? Are we going to keep that adaptability? Are we going to continue to utilize that as a strength? How do we decide what to return with and what to leave behind? That is a big question. And when we return, what are the lessons that we take with us? What will our new direction be? If we simply go back to what we did and who we were, I want to argue, then we have learned nothing. Teshuvah is about looking back so that we can move forward. I want to finish with a parable attributed to a 19th century Hasidic Rabbi, Rabbi Chaim of Zanz. Some of you may even know this. It's beautiful. I love the story. A man's been wandering about in a forest for several days, not knowing which was the right way out. Suddenly he saw a person approaching him. His heart was filled with joy. Now I shall certainly be able to find out what is the right way out. When they neared one another, he asked the man, "Brother, tell me, which is the right way? I've been wandering about in this forest for several days." Said the other to him, "Brother, I don't know the way out either, for I have been wandering around here equally as well. But I can tell you this, do not take the way that I have been taking, for that will lead you astray. Now let us look for a new way out together." The returning we do on the High Holy Days is not about returning to the old path for the sake of comfort and nostalgia. We must seek new paths. These new paths are a result of our experiences, our pain, our joys, our failures, our successes during the past year. What have you learned during the last 2.5 years? What can you take to be a better person, to make this world a better place? As we focus on Teshuvah, seeking return, what will be the new path that you return to? Wishing you all Shana Tova. More importantly, a Gamar Chatima Tova, that you should be sealed for a good year, and the path you choose should bring you better life. And let us say, Amen.